Good morning and welcome, everyone.
Morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Excellent. Well, good. Let's go ahead and jump right in. I know we have some time limitations on some of our members this morning. Myself, I do have a 10:30 meeting. If we still have a quorum at that point, I'm fine with the meeting continuing. We'll have representation on the county will, and Paul can chair. I know that Sam has to jump off this morning, and he had made a request that we tackle the transit element while he's available this morning. And if there's no thoughts otherwise from the committee, I'd suggest we go ahead right to transit.
Sure.
Thank you, Carmine.
Absolutely. Dan, back to you and the team then to lead the transit discussion. Looks like Mr. DeGroot will walk us through that.
So Jim and Mary are here to walk us through the transit discussions. Jim?
Isa, could you pull up the the PowerPoint that I have on my screen here? It's green button share. PowerPoint. Okay, why don't you drive that for you? Now there. Technical assistance there. Anyway, what I wanted to do is start out with what we're currently funding within the with the 2006 plan. Looking at the 2026 TIP, we've identified all of the different services that we are currently funding. You can see them on the spreadsheet here. This is net of maintenance of effort. So the RTA investment at this point is almost $21.3 million per year. If we extend that out for the 20-year life of the RTA Next plan, that works out to $425.84 million.
Sam, Jim, I see Sam's hand went up. Let me go to him before you continue.
Thanks, Carmine. Jim, is it okay if we ask questions now, or do you want to wait till the end?
Please go ahead and bring them on.
Okay, cool. So I see this is all the funding in the TIP, but you've not crosswalked this to the RTA project numbers? Or is that
Though
coming?
I'm going to step through that in a moment. We still have some additional crosswalking to do. But at this point in time, this is the beginning of kind of laying out the story of what we have available.
Okay, and then one other question. This is all RTA?
These are RTA investments. This is what the RTA is currently expending its funds on.
Got you. Thank you, Jim.
Jim, before you proceed, a couple other hands up. So let's go to those questions and then we'll allow you to continue. Bill?
Okay.
Thanks, Carmine. Jim, you said that this is net of maintenance of effort. What is included in the maintenance of effort?
Well, the maintenance of effort is basically the amount of funding that was expended by our jurisdictional partners back in 2003, 2004. That is a baseline or what we benchmark to. And from there, it's expanded by the gross domestic product adjustments. It's a statutory formula that we have to follow.
Okay,
this applies to Pima County, the town of Marana, and to the city of Tucson and town of Oro Valley. Both Oro Valley and the city of Tucson expend more than this themselves already, so we really don't track that. However, since Pima County and Marana do not offer their own services, the RTA enters into an intergovernmental agreement with those two entities annually to transfer the MOE funds to the RTA, which then the RTA distributes.
Good. Thanks, Jim. One more question before you continue, Paul.
Thanks, Carmine. I think Jim just answered my question because I didn't see Sarita or Oro Valley on this list. And I don't know which bucket we are actually being paid out of. And I think we're paid out of two different buckets.
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Kiesler. We do provide funding through expansion services and the existing paratransit services account.
Okay.
So that's how the funding is transferred to the town of Oro Valley for the operations it manages.
Okay.
Excellent. But I'm going to just ask committee members. Looks like Jim just has a short presentation. Sounds like he's going to unfold additional details. Let's maybe wait with questions till he gets through his brief presentation, and then we'll open it up for discussion.
All right, very good. Continuing on, now that we've established what we're currently doing, I wanted to show you what we have currently funded. These are the RTA Next ballot numbers. Total funding amount is $726 million. So that is sizably more than the 425 that we have, and we'll start breaking it down from there. What our commitments are: we have a high capacity transit commitment at 70 million, streetcar operations at 47 million. Oh, I'm sorry, 40 million. Safety and security of regional transit at 51 million, and then the South Tucson allocation at 25 million. And then, add that to the 425 we're currently offering in services. That brings us up to 611,840 with the 726 million available, leaving us 114.16 million available to distribute for new expansions funding, and then the additional amounts for safety and security and streetcar. And I see Paul's hand up.
Paul, you're muted.
I'd like to take a test run. So, Jim, sorry. I've had two questions here. Question number one is, this is an ongoing expense that we'll be experiencing over the next 20 years. I know that we're setting the RTA up for current dollars. How do we accommodate a ballot like this as things get more expensive into the future? For instance, I'll use rough numbers. Oro Valley gets $2 million a year from the RTA, but in 20 years that could be 3.5 million. How are we accommodating that in this right here?
Well, that's a great question, Mr. Kiesler. What I'd say is that everything now at this point is expressed in 2026 dollars.
Mm-hmm.
We will see inflation. We'll also see growth. We have forecast our growth on a fairly conservative basis, and we have built into the plan the expectation that we would have additional funds that we could then distribute to these items in the event that our forecast exceeds or actuals exceed the pessimistic forecast we used.
Okay. I would imagine we'll just handle that in the POPs language.
Yeah, and I would add that Jamie is leading a group right now on financial resiliency and basically measures that we can be monitoring. I think Jamie was looking to jump in here, so Jamie, please feel free.
Thank you, Jim. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Jamie Brown here. Just wanted to add that we will be talking about those financial performance measures very briefly later in this meeting and then in the coming weeks. So that's certainly something we're going to talk about, is those adjustments for year of expenditure dollars for all program elements, all plan elements. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. My second question is what is the safety and security of regional transit? What is that $51 million element?
Well, Mr. Chair, that's something we've begun to define in the project descriptions that you've been working on. We'll continue to work on defining it, and I think it raises the broader question of what are our next steps. And I'll go ahead and share that with you right now. What we are proposing is to move forward with a short-range transit plan. The last short-range transit plan that was done for the region was done in 2017. It was intended to be updated in 2021. However, that was in the very peak of the impact from COVID. So we realized that it was not a federal mandate that we do a short-range transit plan. So we did not do one at the time. I think we're now approaching a more steady state environment. And as such, it's time for us to be looking at redoing the short-range transit plan. That would include a heavy dose of community involvement, and will draw upon the comprehensive operational analysis that was recently completed. We have to look at the distribution commitments made by the RTA board. And we also have a microtransit study that's wrapping up now. And we invested heavily in a 2020 long-range transit plan that I think it would make sense for us to look back at, see if it's still relevant in the post-COVID environment and where we're at right now. I think there's a lot to be learned from it.
So I just follow up to my question. So maybe I was reading it too literal. It's not about it's not posting guards on buses. It's about the financial stability.
No, the safety and security is, it looks at how we can make the transit system more secure. I believe it's envisioned to include a lot of different elements, some of which would be active monitoring at some of our transit stations. It would involve security services. It would involve security improvements, which may include things such as hardening of some of our transit facilities. So it's not fully defined yet, and I think it's a conversation we have to have with the transit community as to what's needed out there and how we best adopt it. And I think doing that through a planning effort is the way to do it.
Would the reinstatement of fares kind of clean up our bus system?
I think that's kind of a loaded question, but I don't believe that it necessarily would.
Okay.
We have lots of opportunities for folks to ride at discount or other rates, and I don't think I think it goes well beyond that. It may not be transit riders that are the problem at the transit stations.
Okay.
And Sam's been patiently with his hand up.
Yeah, go ahead, Sam.
Thanks so much, Mr. Chair, Jim. Good presentation. So if you could go back one slide, Jim, to 3. Okay, thank you. And those are good questions, Paul. I will say that I'll take the liberty of answering some of those for you. The answer of safety and security of regional transit is yes. I would expect it would include increased security at bus stops, could also include increased cleaning of bus stops and bus shelters in the transit centers, as well as investment in the bus stops themselves. I think and why I wanted to make sure I was here for this conversation is this is really good. I think we're starting to get into the detail of what I was hoping we would get into. I need to make sure that I get on the record that there was a commitment made to the city of Tucson in terms of certain allocation of the RTA plan in order for us to have a path to 55%. And I'm encouraged that we've been having conversations about the projects themselves, but I have not seen where we've gotten into the allocation of the dollars. And I think that where it's not been totally clear has been in the transit investment. I think on the projects themselves, it's pretty straightforward. I know we're going to talk about pavement in a little bit. I think that's pretty straightforward. But in terms of the actual transit investment, I think there was an actual number or dollar allocation that was included in the plan that went to the board that I've not yet seen how we're going to incorporate into the POPs and the administrative directive. So I hope that that is going to occur here in the not too distant future, because that's really important for my bosses to ensure we've got support for this plan. That's all I wanted to say. And last thing I want to say too, on the fare question, Paul, that is a loaded question. Whether free fares or not is contributing to safety and security issues. I just want to remind everybody that in our IGAs, we are offering a fare revenue credit. So the RTA is not subsidizing free fares on the transit system for the city of Tucson. We're bearing that cost out of our general fund. Thanks.
Sam. Paul, if I can just go to staff for a moment and ask if they can address the timing question that Sam raised about allocations to specifically the jurisdictions, city of Tucson included.
Dan, we'd be happy to incorporate the allocations in the admin code, and also not only that, but we're committed to tracking that. And as Jamie alluded to, we are going to present some conceptual financial monitoring documents later on today and dive into those deeper on October 15th to show what we could do, and of course get feedback on how we can make that transparent, ensure accountability of that tracking throughout the program.
Excellent, thanks. Paul, I see your hand went down. Did you still have a question?
Well, I was just going to make a comment, and Sam, thanks for the clarification, and I agree with Sam. I think a jurisdictional breakdown of the funding clears up a lot of questions to make sure that all of us who have our programs can easily track that there's money in the RTA next to cover all of those things that we're bringing to the table. So, I agree with that. I think that's a good idea and a worthwhile exercise. On the security thing, I appreciate that answer too, Sam, because we all see the condition not just in the city but around the region of bus stops, groups of people living at bus stops, and just trying to make it more hospitable for daily riders. And that's the only reason I bring up the fare business, is because we see that there is some riders who are riding just because it's a place to get in and out of the heat, and there's some behavioral issues that go on the buses that needs to be addressed, and that possibly a fare could eliminate some of that.
All right. So it sounds like we'll have further conversation on this topic, as referenced in the next steps. I think, Jim, one question that I have, if you can advance to the last slide on next steps, what you outlined there were the elements of a short-range transit plan update. What is the timing of that?
That's a great question. At this point in time, we are currently pursuing a grant for the short-range transit plan. My expectation is that we will likely know about that later this year. And I think the cutoff date is the end of Halloween. Irrespective of that, whether we get the grant or not, we need to be advancing this. And whether we use the grant funding or not, again, doesn't relieve us of this process. So we will move forward on it, and my expectation is that we'll begin it prior to the RTA ballot, and then we'll know as we move through it whether we've got the funding available to implement the short-range transit plan.
Okay. And Jim, I have a follow-up then. So if this is more of a mid to longer range effort, what do we have to do still between now and March 10th relative to this transit topic? You had heard some asks for breakdown of allocations. I know we're going to talk about the financial performance element of it, but what else does this group have to do relative to transit, maybe even in a shorter time frame between now and the end of October, when we're going to be handing stuff off to TMC and the RTA board?
Well, that's a great question, and I think one of the things we can definitely do is talk about what the content is of that short-range transit planning, that study. What is it we're trying to accomplish, and lay out the scope of those services. So we can definitely put that out there to the public. We know how much money is available, and we'll have a process by which we can allocate it to the new expanded services. But do it through the plan.
Okay. Sam?
Yeah, thanks, Carmine. Actually, I was getting to that point as well. A couple thoughts and information I'll share. Annually we enter into IGAs with the RTA for the RTA funded service that Suntran provides. And I believe those are going to go on the mayor and council agenda in November, and we're a little bit behind. But my point is that we will pretty much have the transit service figured out for the remainder of this fiscal year. And typically, Suntran can't just like flip a switch and add new service, on a dime. So I think we've got a little bit of time to identify how to spend some of that extra money. And I think we've got some ideas on how we might do it based on, some of these things Jim has shared. We've got a comprehensive operational analysis that included Sun Shuttle. The micro transit study I know is wrapping up. So we've got some data points that can inform some decision making. And I think we've got time to figure out ultimately how the extra revenue is going to be spent and how it translates to service. Where I think the tricky part is how do we communicate to the public who's going to be voting on this? What are they going to get for what they're voting on? And I think that we could probably put some language together on what that looks like. It might be things like increased frequency, or increased service hours. There might be some routes that maybe we cut back trips on. Recently we may want to add those trips back. I think that's the key that we need to, that's some of the work that I think we need to do in terms of providing clarity to the voters on what they're getting for this investment in transit. And then, this short range transit plan can work its way through the process. All of us can come together and, inform the process and, ultimately dial in specifically how to spend that extra almost $6 million. So that's just a few thoughts. Thanks, Carmine.
Dan or Jim, any feedback on Sam's comments and really how do we maximize this group's effort to get additional clarity around those points that have been raised by Sam and also by Paul?
I think Sam's spot on. We can identify things that we will be able to add. I don't think we can identify specific routes, but we certainly can identify what this may mean in terms of service. And I think we're going to have a very robust conversation around the transit safety and security measures, because I think that's a conversation that I wouldn't want to underestimate the amount of public input we're going to get on that.
So does it make sense for you to work offline and gather some input from Sam and others to bring back any additional details or refinement of content for us as part of what we ultimately pass along to TMC and the RTA board?
Absolutely. Anything that we can gather from our jurisdictional partners in terms of directions that they wish to take with their services and want to put out there are things that we can definitely incorporate in our messaging.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. All right. Sounds like for now, then we're good on transit. I'm wanting to maximize the time of folks that we have available. What's the preference of the group? Do we go back up to the top and touch on admin code and POPs, or do we want to go through some of the items? I heard Sam's interest in pavement, and then I think some of the responses back on the transit element questions that were asked by Paul and Sam are going to be touched upon in the financial considerations overview. So I'm open to meandering a little bit. Want to make the best use of the time of the folks we have. Paul?
My vote is I think we should go to the pavement rehabilitation because, again, these region-wide projects issues is stuff that we all need to be here to talk about.
All right.
I would agree.
Okay, good. So
Okay with that.
let's go to pavement. Oh, yep. Sounds like everybody's good with that. Let's go to pavement, and then maybe after that, let's jump into financial considerations overview, and then we'll head back up to the top of the agenda.
Sounds like I'm still on. So at any rate, this is really an open opportunity for us to hear from our jurisdictional partners about what we have put out there in terms of the proposed guidance for the pavement element. It's fairly broad. We initially focused on poor and failing roadways. We've since stricken that language from the description. We do have allocations by jurisdiction, and we have language that stipulates to 10-year pavement life or 10-year design life for any improvements that we put out there. We don't have much more guidance other than that put out there. We had contemplated in the language breaking up the allocations by period. We have the funding is available over the life of the RTA plan and or RTA next plan, and we had anticipated breaking it up by element or rather by project period, quarters, if you will, for allocation to the jurisdictions, and then let the jurisdictions move forward at their own rates. That was our thinking, but we'd like to hear from our jurisdictional partners as to how that comports with their thinking.
Thoughts from the members? Jim, I know at the last meeting, Jason asked a question about allocation for Pasquayaki tribe, and we had asked that there be some follow-up looking back at specifically the direction by the RTA board. Was that reviewed again, and is there an update on any details?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, and I think Dan has some follow-up information on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Jim. So both Mike and I have had some conversations with Pasquayaki tribe, Mike with OJ and myself with Jason, and basically just reaffirming the thought behind that was looking at the overall broader jurisdictional breakdown of the entire plan, considering that Pasquayaki tribe received approximately $21 million in the roadway project. We were looking at that breakdown from a comprehensive perspective. So that's how that occurred. But if there are additional concerns from the Pasquayaki tribe, we could certainly continue those conversations.
Okay, thanks, Dan.
This is Jason. So my recollection in one of the past meetings was that the tribe had been included in this pavement rehabilitation program. And then, per the last meeting, we are now excluded. You know, we've made the offer to reduce the amount of funding that we have for the funding allocation for Camino de Oeste by like 5 million. And so, you know, we're you know, we're doing our part to try and get this package out to the voters, and I still feel like you know the tribe should be included in this pavement rehabilitation program. You know, we have collector streets on the reservation as well that need maintenance, and like I said, I only receive like $1-2 million per year for roadway, everything roadway related. And so any additional funding that I can use to help with pavement preservation or anything along that matter would be very beneficial to the tribe. So I'm just going to leave it at that. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason. And I think, Dan, maybe, continued follow-up with Jason or by Mike with PYT leadership would be appreciated. I don't know that this is necessarily a item that the policy subcommittee is going to address or resolve. I think what we discussed last time is that in some of the earlier iterations, when we were using an allocation based on percentage of HERF, there was an element for PYT in there, in that in the adoption or the approval of the current plan by the RTA board, that was not carried forward. And so I think carrying that conversation on outside and maybe flagging it either for TMC's awareness or the RTA board seems like an appropriate thing to do with that. So would appreciate that follow-up, Dan.
Hey, Carmine, could I jump in here real quick? I don't mean to jump the queue. I just wanted to, I think it might help Jason a little bit with his research. At the August 15th board meeting, there was some material shared that showed the allocation of the pavement dollars across jurisdiction. I think the numbers got tweaked because the number's a lot higher in that version of the plan. But that, there's not a way to put it in the chat, but that plan, it's page 18 of the board packet, did not show an allocation to Pasquayaki for pavement. But I know that things got tweaked between the 15th and the 25th. So anyway, Jason, you might want to take a look at that as you're talking to RTA and your leadership team.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Dan. We would be happy to follow up. Jason, if that's acceptable to you, we could schedule a leadership meeting to follow up on this topic.
Looks like Jason may have dropped. So yeah, Dan, if you can follow up, that'd be super. Let me go. Paul, you have a hand up.
I'm sorry. This is Jason again.
Okay.
Couldn't find my mic. Yeah, that would be fine. Again, thank you, Sam. I appreciate the feedback as well.
Excellent. So I'm going to go. Paul's hand's down now. John.
Yeah, thanks, Carmine. A question, if I have the most recent description of this item, in the second paragraph, the last line says pavement markings may be reconfigured or increased based on engineering evaluation to meet current jurisdictional guidelines or standards. Do we need that sentence in this item?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Bernal, I think that was added at the request of one of our members who was concerned that if we were to restripe in a different configuration, that might somehow be considered an inappropriate expenditure. There's a lot of concern about when we repave, how we reallocate the lane widths. And that's what that goes to. Okay. I know there's also concern about pedestrian call buttons, ADA improvements as well. So we tried to capture all of the concerns. However, we could certainly lighten it up if folks don't have that concern.
Just a question, Jim. Whatever works. Thanks.
We go to Paul and then Sam.
Sure. So I think I mentioned this last time, my concern on the distribution and how that comes up. Now, I understand that this is all part of the board approved means and method to get the city of Tucson to the 55%. Don't begrudge that whatsoever. But I'm more concerned of when just the general voting public gets this. They're not privy to a lot of this information. And is there a better means and method than showing that distribution, so forward facing, and maybe more into the pops or something like that? Because look at the city of South Tucson getting 8 million for roughly 15 miles of collectors and lane miles of collectors and arterials. In Oro Valley, we have 100 miles of arterials alone, lane miles. So there's an imbalance there, and I just don't want this to be an issue that could possibly create some type of a negative buzz.
Yeah, Paul, thanks for bringing that up. And I do recall we discussed that last time. And I thought we had said that we would look at opportunities to maybe include that elsewhere in the administrative code or the POPs document. And so I thought that there was at least some general support for taking a look at where else it might reside. So let's not lose track of that thread, team, RTA team, if we can, flag that and get some recommendation back in terms of where you think it might land other than on the ballot language itself.
Mr. Chair, if I may, this is not the ballot language. This is actually going to be within the administrative code, the descriptions. The ballot language itself is much simpler and does not reflect the distribution by jurisdiction. Our thought was that this would be kind of the second line of definition where we could make sure that it was clearly articulated what the intent of the board was at the time that the plan was adopted. We would be, certainly we can certainly look at other places that we can put this so it's documented and understood, understanding the sensitivity about the imbalance between the jurisdictions.
Sam, I'm gonna go to Mike. It looks like his hand just went up. He may have some thoughts on that, and then I'll come back to you.
Thank you, Carmine and team. So I get nervous when I hear comments like imbalance and those kinds of things in this kind of a discussion, because just to refresh everyone's memory, when this was voted on by the board, there was a very deliberate effort to spread out the entirety of the program. And it wasn't focused on any one component. It was really the total. And I think that when you look at, for example, the Pasquayaki having no dollars for arterial reconstruction or rehabilitation, that was very much by design in that they have a almost $21 million project within the roadway element. And so the idea was not to, the idea was to balance it based on the percentages that were presented to the board, and I think that most of that was population. The last thing I'll leave you with is the plan itself suggests that the way that the 55%, et cetera, will be addressed is in the admin code, not on the ballot. And so the ballot, we need to try to reduce the complexity of that, if you will. And the board had given us direction to include that in the ballot, in the admin code or in the POPs. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Mike. And just to follow up on that, then, does that make its way into some of the public communication materials, right? So does that get factored in? And maybe that's, a way to at least ensure, right? I think Paul's point is, if I may, sort of translate what I think he said, is not that he thinks it's an imbalance, but that the public may perceive, just based on the numbers, right, the allocation amounts themselves, that it's not balanced. And so will this get rolled in, or how can this get rolled in then to the public communication campaign?
So Carmine, I think the bottom line is that the admin code is the first order of business. Try to work out the detail there so that we can point to it. But we can also include it, and I would even suggest we do include it as a part of the publicity pamphlet, which is part of the voter information, but it is not necessarily the ballot language. So it does more to explain what's on the ballot, if you will. And because the distribution of those dollars and how those dollars are used is part of the admin code and listed on the plan as referencing the admin code, I think there could be language in the publicity pamphlet to explain that. And that, I think, could be to address some of Paul's concerns. I think that could be the place to explain it.
All right, super. Yeah, I think if we just tag this on a parking lot and then, make sure that, in the final review, we're comfortable that we've got the information in the right place and that we're going to include it in that publicity pamphlet that you mentioned, Mike. So thank you. Sam?
Thanks, Carmine. I won't beat this up too much because I think we've covered it. Just again, having some clarity in the administrative code on what's the city's allocation to this element is going to be really important to us. Also, I just want to note that we've established a pretty good relationship with our oversight committees, particularly as it relates to Propositions 101 and 411 in terms of identifying roadways. And so I don't know where that's going to be captured in. Maybe it's just going to be up to us to figure out how we recommend which roads get paved. But we've demonstrated some success with that, and I think we'd like to continue that into the future. That's it. Thank you.
Yes, Sam, I appreciate that comment. County has a transportation advisory committee. They're deeply involved in our establishing of the roads that get approved annually with the funds for the county. And I think that the jurisdictions need to be able to leverage those committees and bodies that help to inform the selection of the roadways. And I think that's the intent, not that, that would be somehow circumvented. So, all right, super. So Jim, from staff's perspective, did you get what you were hoping on this topic on pavement element?
I think we've got a lot of feedback that we can use to refine the language in the project description. Clearly, I think focusing on the less so on the jurisdictions, more on what the goal is, and that is to address the roadways in the poorest condition throughout the region, those arterials and collectors, and really make sure that we're considering how these comments and the language will be perceived.
Yeah, and I think additionally, I heard the administrative code will reflect greater detail, and that will carry forward in some form in the publicity pamphlet. So I think those elements or those details are helpful.
Okay.
Anything else on pavement from the members? Okay, hearing no other input, let's move on to item number 6, financial considerations overview.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the subcommittee. This is Jamie Brown with PAG, and we allocated just a short amount of time for this item on the agenda as a way to introduce it. We intend to bring this forward for more detailed conversations at future meetings, but we've heard repeatedly over the last several weeks about the importance of tracking various financial measures. And so we wanted to let you know our approach to this conversation with the subcommittee to get your feedback. So we did generate it's a one-pager, maybe it's a 1.5 page document that we put in the packet. And I just wanted to walk through that with you very briefly. So you'll see at the top, we have a note to the TMC subcommittee members. So what we're doing is with this sheet, we're outlining what we think are the performance measures, the financial performance measures that we should be tracking. So kind of the what for RTA Next. And then we've also identified just initially kind of the purpose for tracking, or the why, on the right. And this is a preliminary draft. So what we're asking is if you could please give us your feedback on this list within the next week by October 1st. We would greatly appreciate it. What we're trying to do is capture, everything that should be discussed. Now, there are a few items that aren't included that will be happening automatically. Maybe we could include them. For example, we're annually required as the RTA to develop or to work with auditors on a financial audit. So that's going to be automatic, and it's not included. But some of these other ones, we want to get into more detail with this subcommittee about the making sure that we've captured the measure correctly, the what, the why, but also the how. So what we've got a team, and the folks around the table here and others are going to be working to develop the methods for each of these. So we'll, for example, want to document and share with you the products, like the charts, the tables, any key questions and decision points we want to bring forward to you, the frequency of tracking and reporting, and also various methods such as what data sources, assumptions, and calculation steps. So we don't necessarily think we'll get to the point by the end of October of having a fully established, robust set of tools, but we want to get to the point where we have generated confidence by the subcommittee that you understand what will be tracked, why, and how. So that's really where we're going with this. We can talk through any of these if that's helpful. But again, we're going to be walking through all of these with you in more detail. There'll be what we think is like for each one of these performance measures, we'll have a separate sheet that has all those details. And we've already started actually on some of these because in the interest of time, we thought we should just keep moving. So with that, Mr. Chair, that's the introduction to this. We can step through any of these at your pleasure, but really that's what we're looking for today, is just to introduce this item and to seek your input as a subcommittee on this worksheet to see if we've captured most everything. Now, of course, if something comes up during the discussions in the coming weeks, we can always add it. But hopefully we've captured most of the key triggers. And I'm looking at staff to see if there's anything I've missed in this introduction you want to add.
Jamie, just one additional point, just to circle back on Sam's comments. We do have jurisdictional percentage tracking on the second page, so just wanted to point that out.
Okay.
I believe that's number 10.
Perfect. Yeah, what I see is that they ask is that the jurisdictions review and get feedback to you by October 1st. I think we can all have our teams work on doing that. Is there any element of this that anyone would like to discuss now? Are you comfortable that there's a framework that's being assembled that will enable things to be incorporated? I saw some hands fly up. Let me go in order that I kind of saw them. Bill?
Sorry, I wasn't expecting to be first. This is just a comment, just out of curiosity. When we start talking about distribution of the potential additional revenues, and I know we've laid out how they would be distributed percentage-wise between agencies, jurisdictions, that sort of thing. How early in the process do we start to deliver? Is this an annual? We had an extra $2 million this year, so we're going to distribute that? Or are we going to do it on a 5-year basis, or has that really been determined?
Mr. Chair, jump in. So that's a great question, Mr. Carroll. In fact, that's one that we've been talking about internally. So our approach will be to discuss each of these internally and come up with a recommendation, which will be part of these one-pagers. And that's something that we'll explore with the subcommittee. So if we say collectively internally that we think it's something that we'll be revisiting, like you said, every 2 years or more frequently or less frequently, we'll put that recommendation in writing and share with the subcommittee for feedback. And Jim, I know you've had some thoughts on this. I see you nodding your head.
Yeah, I think, yeah, clearly we need to have a conversation about that and set some frequency. Probably, I would lean towards a little less frequent. Look at it at maybe the 5-year intervals corresponding with when we would be also doing our performance audits and other activities like that. But I also recognize that things change quickly at times, and we may want to leave ourselves the flexibility to look at it more frequently in times of great change.
Yeah, that was my thought too, Jim. Is generally less frequent. And then, I was thinking like maybe you look at it every 3 years and only distribute the first year's excess so that you're always maintaining that buffer, because as we found out in the first one, things can get out of hand very quickly. And you hate to have distributed that money and say suddenly, oh my gosh, we really need that. So I'm looking forward to that conversation in the future. Thanks.
Thanks, Bill. Beth?
But yeah, so kind of along those lines, and I guess we haven't seen like the one-page document, but I guess my question was kind of is there like going to be like another column here with, if we determine that something is not the way we expected it, what's the solution? Like when do we have a fix, or what is that fix? And how quickly do we have to make it? So is that included as part of like that one pager, or is that something we still have to work out?
If I may, Mr. Chair, great question, Beth. So that's something where we're actually diving into some of those details and putting together some hypothetical scenarios as kind of trigger points, right, for potential course corrections, subject to feedback from the subcommittee. But we want to work through that internally to think about those scenarios and come back with some recommendations and hopefully explain it in such a way that you understand our thought process. But yeah, absolutely. We'll want to be thinking about what are those triggers in terms of revenue collections, below pessimistic, and at what point is our course correction that's needed, that sort of thing. So we're definitely going to be looking into that and discussing in more detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you. John?
Yes, thank you, Carmine. Just items 1 and 2 on the performance measures only mention project revenue and expenditures, but later on in some other items, you talk about both project and program. I guess I'm just a little sensitive to that. I think the first 2 ought to mention programs as well, because those are less defined. And if this is all about, accountability and transparency, I think we need to report on how those undefined categories are being managed. So just add program to those first 2 items.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair, if I may. Thank you, John. Great question. So the first 2, this was cut and pasted from statute. So if you look at the purpose for tracking column, it says that there's an annual publishing statutory requirement. So I think it's verbatim, but it may have been paraphrased, but we'll look into that. If we want to expand that, even though it's not necessarily listed in statute, that it includes not just projects, but programs, we'll absolutely make that change. That's a great comment. But those first 2 that you see are really from statute, and that's a requirement.
Thanks, Jamie.
Thank you.
Paul?
Thanks, Carmine. I think Beth and I are on the same wavelength here, because my comment was along the lines of jurisdictional expectations of the burn rate. And if a jurisdiction is getting in trouble, either they're getting behind, they're not able to pump the projects out, are there triggers or other mechanisms for them to be able to get help from the RTA? Is there a means and method of the RTA providing, well, you're having problems with this particular corridor project, perhaps we could we would have folks to be able to help manage that project for you. Something where the RTA could help out jurisdictions if they so do need it, and that tracking mechanism to make sure that we don't find out at the end of the plan that your burn rate is below what it needed to be, and that we have constant checking in. I would say annual checking in on the jurisdictions at a minimum with regard to, are there any issues? Do you need any help? Are there other jurisdictions that could help out? Help, it's a regional plan, make it a regional effort.
If I may, Mr. Chair, jump in. Thank you, Paul, for that comment. I will say we've talked internally too about what we presented here, and you'll see it says plan health indicators, financial performance measures, and we have included expenditure rate as one of those measures. But we've also talked about, the broader category of plan health indicators, delivery indicators. And so, Rick and Jim are also contemplating, what are some of those indicators for delivery that we'll be tracking for the life of the program as they relate to, ability to deliver, and at what point, is there a conversation about how there should be some course corrections or how member agencies can help one another. So that's something we're going to be looking at as well. I'm looking at Rick and Jim, if you want to add to that. No? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Beth?
Sorry, I had my hand up from last time. I forgot to put it down.
All right. John, did you have your hand up again?
No, sorry, Carmine.
Okay, real good. Sam?
Thanks, Carmine. I just want to let you know that I'm going to be hopping off in a bit, so I'll stay on as long as I can, but I'm just going to excuse myself here in just a few minutes. So,
okay,
thanks everyone. Appreciate it.
All right, so I think we know what we're tasked with, getting comments back to the RTA team by October 1st on this. Jamie, team, thanks for the start you've given us. I appreciate the depth of attention you've given to it thus far, and I think it'll help inform a conversation that gets us to a good place in the end. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, so I am going to take us back up then to the top of the agenda, unless someone has a different preference. Back to item number 2, review of RTA administrative code and POPs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Dan. We can go ahead and pull up our matrix and continue with our comment resolution that we had started in our last meeting up until we lose a quorum. And so with that, Mr. Chair, perhaps at around 10:20, we could just do a quick quorum check. That's okay, to make sure to see if anyone needs to leave around 10:30.
Sounds good.
Okay. What we've done, based on some feedback last time, is we've come forth with some potential recommended language for a lot of the B categories that we had discussed. So as a quick reminder, the A's, where we all reached agreement, it was an easy fix, done. C's, where we need discussion, and we still have a few of those today. And the B's, where staff would come back with some recommended language to address the comments provided. So we've gone ahead and done that for all of the specific items that we're hoping to address today, but if we don't, we'll certainly continue that forth on October 1st. So as a reminder, we're focusing on design standards, project eligibility, and reimbursement eligibility comments to the POPs, and those are highlighted in yellow. With that, we did overlook the first few of those in our last meeting. They were more broader comments provided by the TMC previously. So just wanted to circle back with those and recognize that we do need some discussion. So those are item number 3, 4, and 5 on the comment matrix. The first one being related to design standards in general. Should PAG be following the PROAG standards for corridor projects, or should an agency choose to exceed these standards and any additional costs incurred must be borne solely by that agency? The second and 2 are related to specific maximums or limitations, if you would, towards shoulder width and landscaping. So just wanted to generally identify those topics and see if we want to discuss those now. We could also, if you want to think about those as we go through the rest of these comments, we could circle back. Mr. Chair, if you have a preference on how to move forward on that.
Anybody have a particular preference? I mean, I'm okay moving through them now.
Sure. If that's the case, we could start with the first one, the design standards. So the general question is should PAG be following any specific standards, PROAG or otherwise, identifying our own standards within the admin code? And with that, the big question is if those standards are exceeded, should the jurisdiction be on the hook for costs incurred beyond that? I see a hand from Beth.
Yep. Go ahead,
So, and I think this might have been one of the comments that originally came from Town of Sarita. We feel pretty strongly that there should be kind of a set of standards that everyone is held to. That, you know, if the Town of Sarita is following, PROAG and we're doing 6-foot sidewalks, and then somebody comes in and says, well, we want to do 12-foot sidewalks, and that's our standard, that's great if that's what is your standard, but I don't think as a region we should be bearing that if that's not, required, somewhere, that if that's just a want as opposed to a need, and following a specific standard, I think limits it to that need. So that's kind of our thought on this. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Beth. I see Catherine has her hand up.
Hi, thanks everyone. I think Beth has a point, but at the same time, I mean, every jurisdiction probably has cross-section standards for different roadway types and the context for what's the most appropriate to build there. And so I don't want to limit ourselves quite in that manner. I know some places will do a multi-use path as opposed to a concrete sidewalk because it just is easier to construct for the topography, or it's better with the adjacent uses. So I want to make sure we're not limiting. The other general comment on this is, I know at least when Pima County worked with HDR on doing the cost estimates for every single one of these projects, we talked about what the cross section that they were estimating was. And so I think it's important that we're, that was the intent, at least from Pima County's standpoint, is we were envisioning building that. So some of them did have a buffered bike lane because of the speed of the roadway. Some may not have. So I think we need to make sure we align with what was estimated. Otherwise, we're going to be off on our ability to deliver these right from the get-go.
Thanks, Catherine. Beth?
So yeah, and I mean, Catherine has a point, but I think that that's maybe like what we're looking for. I mean, we threw out PROAG as an example, but it could be, there could be a couple examples given. It could be PROAG, it could be, approved, like you said, cross-section, design standards that are in place, to your point. A lot of us do have a design standard that you have cross-sections. I think the concern is somebody coming in and especially to like appease a specific group or something, that, hey, we want some wider sidewalks than normal, and this is what'll make us be quiet. Or we want, to Catherine's point, instead of the normal 4-foot buffered bike lane, we want 12 feet. And now we have to do more right-of-way acquisition. I think, just kind of defining like what some of those standards are would be helpful. But as long as they are kind of standards, it's not, we're about paying for one-offs or, something that greatly exceeds a standard.
Thanks, Beth. Paul?
I think there's a way to accomplish both here. I'm a co-author to this comment as well. I think there needs to be some type of uniformity throughout the region, not all of our standards are based on safety minimums. They're also based on community values as well. And that changes from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. So I think where it's not mentioned that there needs to be a level playing field. But Catherine also has a point where, sometimes you have to have, for safety reasons alone, additional improvements. So maybe when we establish what that minimum baseline is when it's not mentioned in the project description, but if a project does need to have something in addition, and that's what's been estimated and that's worked into the cost, would that be worthwhile to just have maybe even a bullet or so in the project description? We're doing this. We're doing 12-foot MUPs because we have a bicycle contingent that can't go on the street, or whatever that may be. But when you differ from whatever the baseline standard is, so we put it in the description itself.
Thanks, Paul. Fausto?
So as I think about this, I mean, I agree with the comments Paul just mentioned, but I don't know if we want to place a specific number at this point. Like he referenced a 12-foot. Again, I know we all have different standards on our roadways for multi-use paths and things like that, but could that change, or could I don't know if we want to have a hard number. Again, on ours, we did mention multi-use path. Does that mean the same thing across the board? I guess that's kind of the crux of it. I think we need to have some latitude to be able to make those improvements, but maybe not hit a hard identified number.
Thank you. Patrick?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't think we would necessarily support the intent of this. There's a lot of design flexibility that we're looking at in our projects. We've been working hard the last couple of years to update standards that would be more appropriate to an urban section, which may look very different to a cross section in a suburban or rural community. So I think that needs to be reflected. As Catherine noted, our cost estimates that were generated out of the HDR exercise did assume that the cross section would be consistent with our current standards at the time. So I think it should be consistent with jurisdictional policies, not trying to impose a regional design standard. And I think there are cost controls that we could look at, which might be a better avenue.
Super. Thanks, Patrick. Beth?
But Patrick and Catherine have both kind of used some of the same language here about how the HDR cost estimates have taken into account certain cross sections, certain needs, and maybe that's what's captured, is that because nobody at this point has taken issue or argued with any of, I'll call it, the specific dollar amounts for any of the individual projects. We've kind of looked at the individual projects, said, as a jurisdiction, you've said you've needed this. This is what the description is. That maybe it's, if something differs, that if your existing HDR cost estimate and cross section included 8-foot sidewalks, and now you want 10, then that's a cost that's borne by the jurisdiction. That you can have what was in that original cost estimate, but if you're going to expand on that, if you're going to add 4 more feet to the buffer for the bike lane, if you're going to make any changes to what was in that cost estimate, you can do that, but you have to bear the cost for that. So maybe that's how we kind of capture this here.
Okay, thanks, Beth. Yeah, and I think that's the theme that I'm hearing, is that we apply some standard and that it be tied to what the scope of the project and the estimate of the project was. If there's an exceedance of that then becomes the responsibility of the agency. And so maybe staff can take the intent there and craft some language that would be helpful for us to take a look at. Again, I think we can move it out of C into B. I see the RTA team has a thought.
This is Rick Ellis. With respect to, I think we can work with some of that, but one thing I want to throw back, not all the projects that wound up in the plan went through that cost estimating exercise. There were several additions, modifications, changes over the course of the evolution on that. So we don't have that as a basis for absolutely every single project in there. So that's why I want to offer that out there, because that may not be an effective comparison for every project, nor would it apply to the categoricals, because we didn't apply any of those tools, techniques, or means or methods to identifying the categorical items or the amounts.
And Mr. Chair, if I can add just real quickly, so the overarching theme with these three items is, what do we do when there's a cost increase beyond the cost? And later on in the comment matrix, when we get down to comment number 74, Rick has proposed a really good process that I think when we review that, that might be a good opportunity to see, since we're a little bit split on the idea of whether we should have, strict standards that can't be exceeded or flexibility, and just looking at the jurisdictional standards, perhaps rather than focusing on that, we could focus on reaching consensus on a process to determine if any of those overages could be approved. So just something to consider when we get there. I think that process is pretty comprehensive, and we would certainly like some input on that.
Thanks, Dan. Patrick?
Yeah, thank you, Dan. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that comment. I think that would be closer to what we would be interested in looking at, something along the lines that has a procedural control and maybe an overall cost control based on the totality of the project cost, instead of trying to specify specific project design elements. Again, as these projects progresses, there might be opportunities for cost savings and reducing kind of our dimensions in one area of our cross section to increase in another area that might not be driving an increased cost, but might be exceeding whatever design controls have been placed on it. For example, in the city, we've been using narrower travel lanes, narrow medians, and reallocating that space within our same cross section.
Thank you, Patrick. Would it make sense to advance, Dan, to the item that you were mentioning that Rick had outlined, an approach and see what that involves, so that we can give you a thumbs up? Yeah, that looks like it meets the needs of these three items.
That was number 74. I'm sorry. My apologies. Rick is right. It's number 80.
Okay.
Okay, so looks like Adam's navigated to it. So I'll read off of kind of what we did, and I'll summarize this to give you the logic and intent of what we talked about on how to address this. And it's all realistically looking at if there is a funding shortfall or a cost increase. So this is the overall process that we came up with and summarized. Projects needing additional funding to deliver shall utilize following process. Step one, upon discovery of a funding shortfall at whatever point in time it's identified, that could be at the DCR phase, 60%, whenever the cost estimate comparison against the budget takes place, the lead jurisdiction and RTA staff will assess the following: amount of funding shortfall, contributing causes, preventative actions that have already been taken, should there be some, such as what Patrick or others described, where there may have been reductions in one area, reallocations, things like that, or that can be taken moving forward. So that's the recovery thing that both Paul and Beth talked about. Comparison of work elements and activities with approved project description. So that comparison still would fold into the equation as to what was intended, how it was allocated, and was it done? How do we match, in other words, on what was promised to the voters and what was identified? Available funding amounts and sources, including local, RTA, and regional sources, and any other relevant information would come into play. Basically patterning this off of kind of what we've been doing informally through some of the recent project discussions as some of the projects have come in and needed additional funding. So this is kind of replicating or summarizing some of the steps we've gone through. Step two would be a summary of this assessment, and the accompanying recommendations are then compiled by the lead jurisdiction and RTA staff. And then we're proposing shared through the TMC and CART committees for input and or recommendations.
Following the review by the committees, updated summary assessment and accompanying recommendations are then shared with the RTA board for final determination and direction. So that's kind of how we are approaching some of the ones that we're recently running into, looking at it, and rather than try to anticipate every what if of overruns, how would we react to it when it's known, identified, and then take into account all those actions and discussion that we just had moving forward. So that's a summary of the process that we identified and wanted to propose to all of you.
Thanks, Rick. Beth, you have any thoughts on how that relates to the discussion we were having up above about the standards and overages related to exceeding a standard?
I think it helps. I think it's a great step forward. I think that's the biggest concern that we had is, how, for lack of a better way to phrase this, how are we, all keeping each other honest? Because I don't know that as a jurisdiction that I have heartburn if another jurisdiction comes back and it says, hey, we want to do wider sidewalk to, appease a resident base, but we're going to cut something else somewhere else and still stay within budget. I think it's when projects start, going out of budget, and then how do we address that need? Like, why? Or it just could be that, hey, concrete's just real expensive right now, that something else is going on, and we didn't change the width of our sidewalks, but the concrete price right now is double what we expected. And, we still need to address that, but just making sure that we're, that there is a procedure to do that. So I think that this would help address that.
Okay. See, Catherine, your hand?
Yeah, I mean, I think this process makes sense. Number one, especially, I would, I'm going back in time to the first 10 years of RTA 1 when every single one of the county projects were also over budget. And so, I would say we did all the things in item 1. I would say when it gets to number 2 in this, we need to engage committees at a lower level than TMC. I think, it was far more successful the first 10 years and less contentious when TIP was having conversations or TPC were having conversations, because those committees are staffed by people far closer to the project. And if you start at TMC, no offense to all these people on TMC that are sitting in this room in this policy subcommittee, you're a bit further afoot from project delivery. And I think that it's more of a report out with a recommendation, whereas that recommendation could be more fully developed at a lower committee.
Appreciate that, Catherine. And so any other, well, I think for RTA team, taking that into consideration, that we let the technical folks have an opportunity to, evaluate, identify options and make a recommendation prior to landing at RTA, TMC, or even the CART for that matter, that there at least be some involvement by one of those lower committees. Other comments in terms of this process's addressing of the standards and cost overages above. I think I heard embedded in many people's comments this idea of the jurisdictional standards adopted at the time. Is that a component in tandem, right? So that there's not ad hoc design decisions being made, but that it's an adopted standard at the time, right? And that has, I think, a framing of what the expectation is. Now, granted, I mean, folks can change their standards, but that would be readily obvious if you're changing a standard coinciding with a single project. So maybe it's a tandemed approach of these two things.
Mr. Chair, this is Dan. Just one thought on that, kind of aligning with what Beth had mentioned, if we are to provide some sort of language to that effect, maybe some flexibility to consider public and stakeholder feedback, so that we're not just sticking to standards when a particular project requires more than the minimum to meet public expectations.
Yeah, I think along those lines, Dan, that's, what I was thinking and maybe didn't fully articulate, but, we have a reference to a standard, but then also we pair it with then this process for flexibility and the, ability to get to something that varies if it meets the other aspects of what we've outlined in the process here. Paul?
I think we've touched on this with regard to, and I'll recant my earlier comment. If the estimates are even based on a particular direction and a particular arrangement of improvements, but in the future, if it comes to be under budget for whatever reason, at that point, I think, we're showing a process here to address that. There needs to be a VE, or there needs to be a value engineering base standard, and maybe that is the PAG standards is the bottom line of the value engineering. That if you can't do a project, even with that, then that warrants going back to the board and asking for those additional funds to be able to do the project. Now, again, this is all about creating baselines, and being able to go back to the board, and if there are contingency monies in the overall budget, being able to tap those contingency monies. But having rails up so that, again, we're not paying for, one community has tree-lined boulevards. Every boulevard needs to be tree-lined with, one tree every 60 feet. But that's not a regional standard. That's not a regional issue. It frightens me a little bit that if we go back to the public, do you want this as a jurisdiction? Because 99% of the time, the public's going to say, yeah, we want that every time you offer something. So I'm very, very cautious about going back to the public and saying, what do you want here? When what we're trying to do is reestablish a project to be able to get it done within budget or within some type of a financial framework that's acceptable to the entire region.
Yeah. Thanks, Paul. I'm going to go to John and then maybe ask staff after that to take the input you've heard, right, in some combined approach between this idea of a standard, some flexibility to vary from that standard, and then the process for dealing with the cost implications of it and building or refining that out for us to take a look back at later. John?
Thank you, Carmine. I'm just encouraging us to not have language in these policies and procedures that is inconsistent with whatever we come up with the project delivery efficiency that the executive director is encouraging us to focus on as well. Just be careful that, because for example, the process that Rick laid out says everything ends up with the board. Well, I don't think all of these decisions have to end up with the board if we have logical people addressing it as we proceed with project development. That's it.
Very good. So Dan, do you have enough feedback on this to at least run through a refinement and come back to it?
Really appreciate the discussion on this one, and just wanted to circle back and just ensure that by enhancing this process and following up on that, would that also address the first three comments that we had mentioned?
Yeah, Dan, I think in my mind, right, there's a couple of components in trying to say, hey, here's, the standard, and it could be as simple as the, standard adopted by the jurisdiction at the time, or that it could be a menu of, right, it could be the PAG standard, the PRORAG, or standard adopted by the jurisdiction at the time of design, and then in tandem, right? If there are cost overages, then it links with the process that we just reviewed, right, in draft form, to say that there's an evaluation and there's some flexibility and input in trying to get to a place where it can be delivered and done so either within cost, or there's the ability for consideration for additional funding if that's appropriate, right? I think it's those pieces. It's some semblance of tying to a standard generally, but allowing for flexibility and having a process in place for evaluation, for adjustments, or seeking of additional funding if the amount is over the project allocation.
And
I
I'd
think
like
that's a
to
great
add
summary. Oh,
the
sorry,
next
Paul.
the next comment on the shoulder widths is just a subset of the one just above it.
Yeah, I think the ones where we're talking about, design standard shoulders, those are handled the same. Does landscaping and art, I think is a little different take, right? The next one down, because that talks about landscaping and art being fully funded by respective sponsoring agencies. Paul, you want to touch on that, or whomever?
Sure.
It was a joint effort.
Yes. So when we put that together, it was back during the discussions on whether there was enough money. And if there's not enough money, what should be borne by the jurisdictions? And it seemed that, landscaping and art is different across the region. There's different needs. There's different citizen groups that you're appeasing. So this was our thought about helping, trying to again get this thing within budget. Now I think the landscape is different than when we had this discussion amongst the three of us, Oro Valley, Marana, and Sarita. So I'd be interested, do we go back to the 4% and 1%? I think I'm a little more flexible right now, particularly if these costs are already put into the HDR estimates.
Catherine, and then I'll go to Fausto after that.
I'll say Pima County can't afford to do the landscape and the art with money other than what was planned for the RTA. And the majority of our roadway projects, we put in a lot of match money. And so that's, I'm speaking only with knowledge of what our revenues are now, but I don't see the state changing something so significantly that we would be able to cover these expenses in any other way than with the project.
Thanks, Catherine. Fausto?
Yeah, I'm flexible as well. I think we go back with the percentage and establish the baseline. And then I think anything above that, maybe either A, it's borne by the agency, or they can go through a similar process as we talked about for items 13 and 14.
I think that seems reasonable. I see some heads nodding. So, relying on or utilizing a standard, right, percentage, and then variation from that either is the responsibility of the agency, or they would utilize the process that we've just talked about a bit.
And if I may offer too, one of the things that as you're executing a project, the first value engineering element to go is art. The second is a reduction in landscaping. And I think we do need to have that flexibility, that this is labeled as up to, rather than thou shalt spend 1% on art, thou shalt spend 4% on landscaping at a minimum.
Dan, I recall a comment, though forgot who mentioned it, but previously there was some discussion about some projects sharing a a greater share of the percentage towards landscaping and artwork when that was more the primary function, or maybe it was a smaller project, some sort of enhancement project where that was kind of part of the focus of it. So just wondering if there needs to be any consideration or flexibility for different types of projects at all.
Yeah, Dan, I think that was Patrick who brought that up the last time we touched on this. So let me see if Patrick has any thoughts and then go to others.
Yeah, thanks, Carmine. And I know Jim had also made comments to that effect. You know, this would probably most particularly affect the active mode safety category, and maybe there's a way we can look at that programmatically or within that element. So instead of assigning a percentage to the specific project, potentially allow the flexibility to have a percentage assigned not to exceed whatever the allocation is to the jurisdiction to be distributed across their projects. Because some of them might be appropriate for landscaping and public art and others may not. You know, if we're doing sidewalk infill, it might not lend itself necessarily to any landscape enhancements, but if we're doing something that's like a longer bike corridor, perhaps it does.
Beth?
I think this goes to what Paul was just saying, that right now we leave them as an up to, a maximum, and then with the comment or the process we were just talking about in the last item, that if you do have a project that specifically needs more than that, there is going to be a process that, hey, this can be reviewed, and this is why this needs to be 6% because of these elements. That I think that last conversation takes care of that as well for those one-offs. I don't think we're ever going to create a policy or a procedure that handles every single project, but if it handles the bulk of them, and then there's that process for handling those one-offs that we all agreed on, I think that kind of covers it.
I heard Patrick suggest that if it exceeds the threshold but can be incorporated within the overall project budget, that there be allowed to be some flexibility there. And that's a concept we discussed with the overall process and saying, look, if you plus up here, but you're reducing there and you stay within the overall project budget, that's reasonable. So I think, accommodating for that would be important as well.
I think that's a fair comment, Patrick and Mr. Chair. I think we could work on enhancing the language to that to address those comments.
Okay.
Let me check the time real quick. We're at 10:04. I think we can continue down a few more comments if you'd like, Mr. Chair, and see where we get in the next 15 minutes.
Yes, please.
Okay. Go down to comment number 34. And one question before we move forward, Mr. Chair. So we've taken a stab to provide some specific wording to address all the Bs. Do we want to circle back and go through all those one by one? Or would you like an opportunity to review those and perhaps just call out any specific items that need further review for our next comment resolution meeting? Do you have a preference?
I do not. Let's go through, some more of these. How many more do we have in this category that we're currently working on?
And a quick count.
Like roughly about 10 more, give or take. 10 to 12 more. For the Bs and the yellows.
So we can try to see how many we go through.
I'm just wondering if we get through the ones we haven't touched on completely, right, before we go back to reviewing the adjustments that were made to ones we've already discussed, is why I asked that question.
Okay, we could certainly do that. Last time we made it through all of section 17 comments. So if we want to proceed beyond that, to have some new discussion, we could continue on comment number 69. This comment, coming from the city of Tucson, was related to project eligibility. The comment is not sure where it should be listed, but we want to establish a recommended procedure for categorical projects with jurisdictional carve-outs. What is the role of the RTA versus a sponsoring jurisdiction? How are projects authorized and funded if not through a regional competitive process? And with that, Rick has provided a process. So Rick, would you mind reviewing that for us real quick?
Absolutely, Dan, thank you. So like last time, I'll walk you through this. Please tell me if I'm going through too quickly or reading too fast. So project proposals intending to use categorical funds shall utilize following process. On a yearly basis, RTA staff will assess overall program to determine amount of funding that will be available to the region for each element. So this has been done in conjunction with what Jamie talked about of our financial assessment that he's working on. So we've coordinated these efforts. In close coordination with this assessment, RTA and PAG staff will assess the performance measures to help identify potential strategic investment opportunities. Where are we performing on safety? How's our overall bike and pedestrian mobility? Do we have any hotspot locations that are triggering or causing concern as we look at our general performance across the region? This information will then be shared with jurisdictions in a group meeting to assess investment opportunities. I did not specify committees on that one, but can if so desired. Second step, subsequent project requests then should be developed jointly between the owner jurisdiction and RTA staff. Information to be discussed would include, but not limited to, the following: who would serve as lead jurisdiction, and are there any partner jurisdictions be involved, projects that span multiple jurisdictions? What are the roles and responsibilities, governing requirements, regulations, including design standards that will be followed? Was the overall scope and descriptions of work to be authorized? What is the schedule of tasks and activities to be performed within the authorized amount? So for instance, if there was initial allocation for planning or initial design work, how would that be accompanied? And then with the overall anticipated time frame for delivery of the whole project effort. Funding amounts and sources to be used, broken out per task, so that all be folded into the discussion. A draft IGA would be developed that captures all this information, reviewed by staff from RTA and the lead jurisdiction. IGA is then presented to the board, and following approval, presented to the governing body for the lead jurisdiction. And upon final execution, lead jurisdiction is notified that they are authorized to proceed. With that, Mr. Chair, I can clarify anything on the logic, rationale, or take any comments or feedback.
Any questions for Rick or comments? Patrick?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Rick. So would this apply specifically to a subset of the categoricals? I know previously in this meeting we had talked about a different approach for the allocation of the pavement funds, which it sounded like leaning towards a 5-year allocation, kind of IGA, for the jurisdictions to deliver under their own time frame. And I'm wondering if we would want to treat that similarly for the other categoricals instead of carving out an individual one, obviously with some reporting, some quality assurances and expectations of projects to be met, but having more on that than that kind of one year-to-year basis, and maybe programming it out on the tip cycle might be give more certainty to the jurisdictions to align resources for project delivery.
Try to answer it this way. I think recognizing that many of the categorical elements outside of the pavement are a little more open-ended, whereas the pavement's fairly specific. That's why you see the difference in the process thinking on that one. It's not to say they can't be combined, but that's the logic to answer your original question.
Thank you, Rick.
Catherine?
Yeah, I mean, the process outlined is thorough. It feels very complicated for the document we're reviewing. I mean, on a yearly basis, like a annual call for projects, these funds, again, I'll harken back to the first 10 years of RTA. There was a certain amount of funding. There was a call for projects. we worked through tip processes, we determined what they should be. I agree with consideration of performance measures. I don't know if what is being suggested in here in terms of strategic investment means that there's going to be limitations on where jurisdictions can apply for projects based on that analysis of performance measures. So I guess I have some concerns with the amount of specificity being put in here when, to me, same as what Patrick, I think, a little bit alluded to. If there was just a frequency, every 2 years there'll be a call based upon funding availability, that would be much easier to plan our programs off of that, more certainty.
Beth?
Something Catherine just touched on is I don't want to make processes just to make processes. That we do have a TPC and a process for when there's NOFAs and things along those lines. Let's take advantage of those. And maybe we're just capturing that it's the TPC that is making this decision through the process that we've kind of always used. And we know it's the right people, to the point Catherine made earlier, that even the members of the TMC have indicated that they would like to step back from some of these technical decisions, even though they are the technical management committee, that these decisions should be made by the people who are closer to these decisions. So let's capture those people in these procedures, that this is an existing procedure and we're going to continue to use it, as opposed to having now these kind of two conflicting processes. So
Thanks, Beth. Rick, can you speak to what the existing process is, or the previously utilized process has been, and how this proposed approach is similar or varies from it?
Can't, because of the limitations that have been on any of the categorical funds kind of were in place before I came over here. So Jim, Jamie, do you guys have a better feel for how more of a open-ended funding? Closest I've got is the RTAG. And I know that's so limited. So how did this handle when we were having much, much more robust dollar values? Anybody?
If I may, I think that highlights sort of, some of the comments that were made, and it might be helpful to take this offline a bit and consult with some of the longer tenured members of, say, the TPC, or, folks that are, on this policy subcommittee that have been, present around this stuff for a little while, and see if there's some refinement. I think what I'm hearing is that we want to have a clear process. We want that process to be streamlined and easy to follow. And so, if there's a way to, trim down the amount of text associated with this, with input of folks, it sounds like some of these things match with what we've done before, but there's different words being used to describe it, and there's more text associated with it. So I think it would be helpful to gather some input. And you heard Catherine, you heard Beth, both reference what was previously done. Maybe that's a good starting point, Rick, to huddle with them and see what refinements could be made to simplify.
I think I was trying to reflect and capture that. Obviously, you're seeing it in Rick speak more than anything else. And if that got too wordy, then my apologies on that. Because as you were both describing kind of what happened, it did go through that open forum. It'd be the same dialogue and discussion. If there are strategic investment opportunities or needs, we would like to bring technical experts that could present that, so that if it's TIP or TPC that's the desired forum for that, they would know, here's a section. We may have a particular sub-region within the area that we're underperforming in, or a certain category that we're underperforming in, and we think we should invest in those to make a serious dent in that issue. That was the idea of mostly step one, because once the discussion and the allocations take place in step, I guess, at that effort, then step two becomes the mechanics that we're utilizing now.
So that's kind of simply once the identification has been agreed to. I think what we were trying to avoid was the blind submittal of projects, try to put them all in some matrix, try to have comparison of safety against capacity, against operational, and trying to figure out how to do that when in reality, we may be able to balance that through the easier discussion. And if that's what Catherine, you and Beth were after, we can certainly consolidate the wording to reflect that better. And I'll follow up with you guys on that.
Patrick?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to echo, I think, my colleagues Beth and Catherine stating that I think there's a more straightforward way to approach this and one that we already have procedures for. And I would encourage just identifying the funding availability for the 5 years as we do our TIP update cycles and have the jurisdictions program those through the TIP process and do approvals through the TIP process and not set up a separate procedure. I think if I'm capturing kind of and agreeing with what Catherine and Beth stated, so it can be more straightforward than that. And I think where we simplify that, especially where we have those jurisdiction or carve out controls where we know that we've got X number of dollars for 5 years for Pima County in this category, they can program those funds.
Very good, Patrick. So Rick, I mean, maybe, including COT in a discussion about how to, refine the language here. But I think we've got, conceptual, I think this falls into a B. Conceptually, right, we want to have a process in place. We want it to be one that's easily understood and followed. And so, I think it's a B.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Quick time check. It's 10:18. Do we want to pause here and just confirm if we're going to have a quorum to continue real quick? You mentioned, Mr. Chair, that you have to drop off in about 10 minutes. Are there any others that need to leave before 11:30?
Not seeing anybody. So,
Okay. That being the case, and since Catherine is present, Mr. Chair, if when you drop off, if we're okay moving forward with the Vice Chair taking over, we can proceed at your discretion.
absolutely.
Great. All right. Well, let's continue while you're here, Mr. Chair, and then just let us know when you have to leave. The next comment, number 70, originally came from Oro Valley. This is related to restriction of RTA funds. The comment is, the section states that the use of federal funds or other funding sources may involve further restrictions on the use of RTA funds. Comment is, how will it restrict RTA funds? Many RTA projects were funded with state and federal funds. And our recommendation is actually deleting this original clause. It was, I think, originally for general awareness, but we aren't intending to restrict the use of the funds.
Paul, I think basically we all agreed with you that it's not the funds that necessarily become restricted, but the project may go through different things. So saw the confusion that you were seeing, and if everybody's okay with it, we just didn't feel that clause added any more value.
Thank you.
Okay. Everybody okay with that?
If we need to pull it up, please let us know. We can refer back to the POPs if we need to.
No, it was just confusing.
Okay. We can delete that. And moving on to comment 71, also from Oro Valley, related to enhancements. Comment is, this is new. Enhancement projects were supplemented with RTA categorical funding. And then Rick, I don't know if you'd like to go over the recommendation there.
So in that one, let me make sure I got my cross references on this. Bear with me for a second. Paul, if I understood correctly, I think when you were referencing the comment that, where I'm at. I don't think we were talking about enhancement projects per se. I think this was referring to the extras above and beyond, the sweeteners, if you will, we were referencing during the standards discussion. So kind of, I guess in essence, trying to read your mind on this one, felt that it was, okay, it's a little vague and nebulous, and maybe we can fold that back up underneath the
recommend deleting this provision. And then I think based on the earlier discussion about the standards, that would capture it.
Yeah, that would be, yes. Thank you, Rick, because that was not the direction. I was being very literal here. I thought we were talking enhancement projects as though you would work at an enhancement project with ADOT. And I didn't see that as a categorical that we had because we have all those enhancement elements in our corridor projects already. So a little bit of confusion on my part. But I understand your thoughts behind this.
And from what discussion proceeded with the standards and the process and the evaluation for all that stuff, I think we can beef that up to make that more robust. That would then capture, I think, the intent of this particular section at least.
Yeah, so I would withdraw my comment based on that.
Okay.
And with that, our recommendation is to delete that 6A reference to enhancement projects, just because the language is confusing and kind of redundant of the process that Rick had outlined.
We'll make sure we cross-check this again then for the benefit of the subcommittee to make sure that as we beef up those prior sections and that overall aspect of it, that we're not losing the capability of this one as well. So we'll do that cross-check on our end.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Chair, if there are no other comments on that one, we could move to comment number 74, also from Oro Valley, related to advancing projects. And with this, I'll turn it back over to Rick since he outlines a process here.
Correct. So let me see if I, because I think comments 74 and 75 kind of danced on it. I tried to kill two birds with one stone.
I was looking for flexibility because, I mean, we're setting a 20-year plan here, and we're setting the periods in which they're going to happen. But who knows, in 10 years, population changes, just shifts in priorities. You may need to take a period 4 project and do it in period 2. So there needs to be so that the cash flow works out. And your own particular capabilities, be able to move that period 2 project into period 4. So I'm trying to create that type of flexibility, not changing the plan, just a little bit of the timing based on needs.
Okay, and I'm going to try to weave that in with some of the discussion that I think one of the other jurisdictional members I've heard from about how do we get this initiated, because just doing the design, the clearances, the right-of-ways, the utilities, all within a certain period may be problematic for some of the more complicated projects. So how do we get earlier activities going? So I tried to tackle both items of initiating and advancing, but see if I captured this. So like before, I've got kind of an initiation process here laid out with the following. Project requests would be developed jointly between the owner jurisdiction and RTA staff. The information discussed would be including but not limited to who's going to serve as lead jurisdiction, partner jurisdictions that may be involved, all those aspects I've talked about earlier, roles, responsibilities, governing requirements and regulations, including design standards, project scope descriptions, work to be authorized, schedule of tasks and activities. So very similar to what we outlined in the other one. Draft IGA, all that stuff going forward. The clause that comes into play, so that's basically how we'd initiate. So at any point in time, there can be a discussion between the owner jurisdiction wanting to initiate project activities. If there's a desire to get it going earlier, and we just be mindful of the desire to keep delivery timeframes compressed to the maximum degree possible, not extended just by starting earlier. The clause we added to your question, Paul, is in the event there's an opportunity to start construction on a project in an earlier phase, the lead jurisdiction and RTA staff shall review the proposed request and assess the capabilities of the program to support this action. So do we have financial capabilities? Assessment will include, but not limited to, what's work environment, meaning what's our bidding climate, what's our contracting capabilities. I just put that all under the guise of work environment.
pricing, things like that? Is it opportunistic or is it more problematic? Capabilities for delivery, funding amounts needed, including a source, any potential need for debt service, and any risks associated with advancement or any risks associated with not advancing. So this would open the door to any and all those possibilities. And rather than trying to what if them at this time, we, like we've talked about, would include a process then to make that determination at the time. There may be 3 or 4 projects that jurisdictions bring forward and say, we are in a right bidding market. It's absolutely paramount that we move forward because the pricing is available and we can match the delivery. How do we accommodate that?
Yeah,
Conversely, there may be, this is not a good time for certain types of projects, but others are capable of moving forward. So
Hey,
Rick,
Paul, maybe before you go into your conversation there, I'm going to drop, so I'm going to turn over to you. Thank you all for everything today. Appreciate the good progress being made.
thanks, Carmine.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So Rick, my only concern here is really the debt service. So I wanted to allow that flexibility, but that flexibility, somehow framing the flexibility that it does not impact the program, doesn't eat up contingency, doesn't create additional debt service. That's really kind of the bottom line here. Jurisdictions should have a little bit more control and again, flexibility based upon, as things develop into the future. So I like how you've outlined this. It ultimately becomes a board decision. So thanks for pulling that together. And I think you captured the essence of my comment just now.
thanks.
All righty. Does anybody else want to add on to this at all? I don't know if this is something for a concern of any of the other jurisdictions. All right.
Paul, one thing I'll add in there, I think several of us have talked and we realize we may be introducing a lot of processes, so I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but it was a comment that was made during some of our staff discussions and some of our prep work on this is we may be proposing process that we'll want to test drive, notwithstanding some of the comments both Beth and Patrick Fausto and Catherine made about utilizing existing. So where we're incorporating something, we recognize there may be either a learning curve or we may adjust on the fly. So I wouldn't treat this as absolutely set in stone biblical, but it would give a common understanding starting point for us to work from as we go forward, at least that would lay it out and go, now let's try it, see how it works for us and where refinements can be made from there.
Yeah,
Hope that clarification helps.
I would agree with that. We're trying to take lessons learned from the previous stab. When I say stab, the previous 20 years, and just correct those things where I think we had a few holes. So, but in correcting, there's unintended consequences that pop up. So I'm hoping everybody gets a chance to take a good run through this. Get your comments put on it, but we keep that flexibility as well as we, I think the administrative code should be flexible as we learn things.
Perfectly said. Okay.
All right, let's, Dan, if we could keep moving.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I did just want to check real quick. We've got about an hour left. Only a handful more of the comments that we want to address today and 2 more items. Do we need a quick 5-minute break, Mr. Chair? From anyone?
Show of hands, anybody need to take a break? Because we've been going at it for 2 hours. Why don't we take 5, just a biologic break and get back here at 10:35. Does that work for everybody?
That's great.
Sounds good.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We'll be right back.
Sounds good.
I was waiting to have break and I was like, oh, the time's low. You remind me. Oh, God, I heard that. Yeah. So I'm just got out a little early. Exactly. Looks like I get to have
Mr. Chair, this is Dan. We'll just need 1 or 2 more minutes to prepare to resume, if that's okay.
That works for me. I had to make a call, so now I can actually get my biologic taken care of.
Thank you. I'll let you know once we're ready to roll.
Perfect.
This is Dan. Our staff are ready to continue. Whenever you are, just let us know when you're ready to resume. We are ready to resume at your discretion.
Yep, let's roll right back into the comments. I would like to, according to the agenda, I think we need 15 minutes for our last item. So if we could run these comments till, let's call 10:10, and that will allow us our 15 minutes plus a little bit of a cushion to take care of our last agenda item. Does that sound good to the group?
And we did skip item 3, which was RTA delivery oversight, accountability, and transportation transparency improvement.
That's what I was referring to.
Oh, gotcha. That should be sufficient time on our end.
Okay, great. All right.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. This is Jason Mahi.
Yes.
Just wanted to let you know I have to drop off here in about 10 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do we have ample coverage for you? Do you have somebody else here for you?
No, I don't. No, you don't.
Mr. Chair, let's see if we can get through these final 4 comments before Jason has to jump off. The other 2 items are informational.
Sounds good.
Okay. So I believe that the last discussion covered items 80, 81, and 82 on the comment resolution. So we're moving down to comment number 83 related to scope changes. And this also came from Oro Valley. Comment is, commenter agrees with another comment. Should scope changes be made to reduce cost and align better with project needs, with the concurrence of the RTA board, redesign may be reimbursed. And this is related to past discussions, but we just wanted to get some clarification if this comment was addressed in some of our past discussions, or if we need to further enhance some of our past procedural discussions.
And Paul, to expand on that, as I read it several times, the provision of unless the scope or concept change is made with the concurrence of the board opens the door then for eligibility of reimbursement. So I guess that's where I wasn't quite sure. It seemed clarification, but I wasn't sure if I was missing anything, and that's what we wanted to ask where you were going with that one.
I don't remember off the top of my head on that. Could we bring that up on the screen, please?
Are you able to pull up the POPs? Just one moment, Mr. Chair. We'll pull it up.
I can read it in the meantime if that helps.
Page 23.
We're pulling it up right now. There it is, Mr. Chair, and we're going to go down to page number 23. And the comment is on item 5, sub item E. Sorry, you're going a little too fast for me. Just above that one. Right there. Oh, right there, E, the reimbursements. So reimbursements will not be made for redesign due to change of project scope or design concept. The additional comment added was unless the scope or concept change is made with the concurrence of the RTA board.
Okay. Yeah, that was based on again having, let's call projects somewhat designed by committee that cause change after change after change. I think there needs to be a baseline with regard to what you can charge the RTA for your design costs, or how many bites of the apple you get here before you have to go back to the board, and the board determines whether or not that should be eligible. That was the purpose of that comment.
And Mr. Vice Chair, Beth has her hand up.
Yeah, Beth?
So Paul, I think, your comment where, and specifically like where people kind of keep coming back with change after change after change because, the public is redesigning something or, something along those lines, that, I know that there was a memo that went out recently about, project delivery. And I'm not sure, where these two things, juxtapose with each other, because, some of the comments that Mr. Ortega made I think were really valid, like about how once you get to 30%, kind of your plans are set, minus any, fatal flaw that comes up, potentially later. Because things like that would help with the keeping the project from consistently changing and changing. Because I don't necessarily mind if somebody hasn't even started design yet and they're doing public comment and they're making making some changes. But I mean, once design is started, that we can't keep going back to the drawing board. It's like, oh well, we got to 60%, but now we're going to change all the lane widths, or now we're at 90% and we need to do something different. So like I'm not sure where those comments kind of intersect with this, because I think that there were some really great suggestions in that delivery memo.
Yeah, and I think this is also allowing for a trigger too to go back to the board. I'll use a project in RTA 1 where there was an original design, original scope and design for 6 lanes on First Avenue, yet the city was able to based on costs, the bridge costs were extraordinary and almost unattainable without some type of federal aid, and they went back and did some value engineering to get that back in scope, and it's back to 4 lanes. And if that's the case, there needs to be the ability to go to the board, I think, to allow for that flexibility. But we need a baseline, and that baseline is, as you mentioned, Beth, you get to 30%, you get your schematic design done, you should be pretty well set. You know, you got your DCR, you got your traffic impact statements, you've got all the base work to move ahead. And unless it's something that's extraordinary, like I'll use the First Avenue project, that the inflation was an extraordinary situation that caused that redesign. That seems to me to be that justifiable question to take to the board and say, hey, I got to redesign this. But if you're designing by committee for whatever reason, and you're down the road, and then you get a new group to come in and interject and say, no, we want this, and you have to do a redesign, that's where I think, that's where the line needs to be drawn.
Right, so Paul, this is, to your point, that I think that we have that process where you get to 30% and then your design is set. However, but I think that this is what we have to capture here, is that it's the after the 30%, that the 30% has to be captured. That sure. After 30%, something could still happen. Like you could come up with, the cost estimate or something else that is that fatal flaw, like First Avenue. And then what? How do we pivot? And that's when it has to go to the board, or here's the next set of steps. But barring everything else, if it's not a fatal flaw, then 30% is 30%.
Right. So, Beth, I agree with you. I think is additional clarification needed? Absolutely. So, staff, based on this conversation, do you have at least kind of the framework? Mr. Ortega, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Paul. The thing that's really weighing on me here, and I'm crystal clear on the spirit and intent, but what's weighing on me is who makes the decision when the 30% plans are complete or approved. And that's kind of that's a loose definition, okay? And I think that as you're contemplating this, the bottom line will be at what point and who makes the call that we're done. In other words, the 30% plans we've hit that milestone. And so I just throw that out to you because I think that in the longer term, as we're going down this path, will be more of a challenge than we might be thinking. So anyway, I throw that out to you for you all to mull over. I don't have an answer for that, but I think it's important to talk through.
That's fair. That's fair. Beth?
So, Mr. Chair, I would offer that the 30% plans are done when we've authorized payment to the consultant for said 30% plans, because that's usually one of their benchmarks. Is that if we've paid them for it, then they must be done.
Right.
Otherwise, why do we pay them? And then I have more questions.
Okay. Well, Beth, since you've got the mic, why don't you? I hear what you say. I think that does create a bit of a benchmark as to when. Now, I do feel that without specifics, which I think we could go ad nauseum as to what creates a 30% design plan. But if you've paid your consultant for 30% design plans, then maybe that is a good benchmark here.
Because everybody submits to the RTA for reimbursement, and if you've submitted, and then the RTA can track that as well. Oh, I just got the reimbursement request for 30% plans.
Right.
And therefore, as part of the reporting, like, hey, TPC, TMC board, this project has reached this key milestone.
Right.
So,
that's a good point. Let me, and I think we've got this captured here. Staff.
Mr. Vice Chair, this is Dan. If I may, perhaps we could circle back on this. I just wanted to follow up with Jason before he leaves real quick. Jason, just so you know, the next two items are in your packet related to delivery and the timeline. If you do have any comments on those, please feel free to send them to me, and I'll make sure that we discuss that in our next meeting.
Okay,
and Mr.
I
Chair,
will.
thank you, Jason.
I'll make comments. Thank you. All right, I'm going to sign off now.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Jason. And Mr. Chair, with that, since Jason's logging off, perhaps we can hold our final 3 comments for our October 1st meeting so he could be a part of those discussions.
Yeah,
That would be appropriate.
I would not want to have a jurisdiction boxed out on this important discussion. So I think you've got the gist of the comment here. I think you could use a little more meat on the bones. So could we mark this as a B? Thank you.
Certainly.
And yes, Paul, that gave us enough discussion to work with and come up with something. So thank you, guys.
All right, perfect. All right. Dan, you want to take us on to the informational elements?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. If we could pull up the handout for item number 3. This topic is RTA delivery, oversight, accountability, and transparency improvement opportunities. And for awareness, our Executive Director, Mike Ortega, will be bringing forth a memo and summarizing that tomorrow at the council board meetings. And what we've done is we've just created a one-pager which kind of highlights the opportunities for improvement related to these topics that we've heard to date, and also some staff recommendations on how we could potentially improve delivery moving forward. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Rick Ellis to walk us through this.
No, perfect segue, Dan. Thank you. Last time, and you will notice some slight differences between the memos that have been put together that Mike is sending to the board, as well as the one I did for you guys. Same intent, same information. It's just been formatted and tailored to the particular audiences of there. So if you do notice differences, that's all you're going to notice, is just for those particular aspects of it. So as Dan said, this was kind of our side-by-side comparison of where we're identifying the issues, summarizing them, if you will, and then kind of what the proactive action that we could look to incorporate and implement and further flush out if need be on improving that overall delivery and compressing those timeframes to ensure that we're generating the product that we need and avoiding some of the pitfalls that we've all been talking about. Paul, at your pleasure, I can walk through in a little bit, summarize it if you feel that would be helpful. I know I gave a quick overview at the last meeting. Only had a few minutes to do so. I can go off into a little bit more as you see fit. I'll follow your lead, sir.
Dan, I believe this is our last item, right?
We also have the timeline at the very end.
Okay.
But yes, and both of these are informational items. And just as a note, I believe we lost our quorum, so we wouldn't be taking any action on these items.
Yeah, and I think we have a little extra time here. Why don't, Rick, if you could spend a little extra time on this and walk us through this.
This then, and I'll try to correlate the issues that we were hearing back with kind of the simple high clip solutions. Obviously the devil's in the details, and we would flush that out, but we want to get the gun aimed in the right direction on this. So looking first and foremost, a lot of the comments and feedback we heard on the design plans correlated to the review periods, revising past decisions, as you've talked about, the extra analysis, formatting revisions back and forth. It'd be nice to see, boy, we'd like to have, can you add this? Things that wind up adding a lot of time on that. Cluttered plan sets, late changes or redesign, that's paramount. We heard that as well. And then the lengthy decision-making coupled with the lengthy public involvement. This was not prevalent across all, but it was popping up enough to where it's obvious, it's identified, and it's sticking out. So our counter to that, or our proposed solutions that we think would engage with that, is obviously quicker decisions, but trying to isolate and go with fewer plan sets. So identifying where simpler submittals or consolidated or combined submittals could work to our advantage. Instead of doing 15, 30s, 60s, 90s, 100s, maybe there's opportunities for certain projects to combine some of that. Defined review periods and making sure that those are adhered to. From what we talked about, every jurisdiction intends to do that, tries to do that, and there's always the desire to say, well, can we accommodate a couple extra weeks? We haven't had a chance to. It's building in means and methods up front within the jurisdictions or utilizing other partners that can act in a more aggressive capacity so those timeframes can be held. So possibly utilizing then on-call consultants or project consultants, GECs if desired, rather than relying on staff that may be functioning or working on other activities. Also utilizing the IGA charters more effectively if we need to for capturing some of that stuff or some of those key decisions and being locked in. Moving forward and maintaining decisions unless change standards, new laws, change conditions. So that's really reflecting the comments and discussion we talked about earlier at the 30% milestone. 30% is closely associated for some jurisdictions with the design concept report or DCR. 30% may be a little more robust level than some of them, but it's swirling in the same ballpark in there. Maybe there's possibilities for beefing up those requirements, taking a little extra time, but reaching that point and then locking in key things associated with cross-section, channelization, horizontal and vertical alignments, major minor structures, etc. Scope commitment sign-offs was suggested, and then following along the comment that was brought up earlier is that we do a lot of public engagement, a lot more of the feedback, dialogue, interaction, possibly alternatives evaluations from 0 to 30. And then once you hit that 30% milestone, recognizing it's locked in. Unless we have significant changes to our conditions, codes, or governing policies, folks, we're not going to change it because it would be nice to.
What's the consensus? Rick, if we take just a quick break on this, what's the consensus of the group for number one? Is this something that we're seeing across the board? I'll offer that I think it's the establishment of the actual parameters of the project, which eats up the most time. The plan sets, that's perfunctory. If we did fewer, would that save time? I think that's marginal. I think the biggest time suck alone is establishing what's this project going to actually do. And that's just based upon my own experience. Anybody want to chime in on that? Bill.
I agree with you, Paul. It's what's this project actually going to do? And then the other part of it is when we decide that what we thought the project was going to do isn't what the project is going to do anymore. But that really is the element. You're right. Putting together a set of plans was fairly straightforward, as long as it's the same set of plans in the end as it was going to be in the beginning.
Right. Beth, you had your hand up? Yes.
So, Paul, having worked for multiple jurisdictions, and if you're gonna ask me the question of what's the biggest time suck, and this is I think why I keep kind of hammering home on like the public involvement, is that at a certain point public involvement should become public updates, because the public involvement is it's happening concurrent with all these other things. The consultant doesn't stop and wait for this public involvement meeting to happen. They're behind the scenes expending hours and hours of time making these plan changes or creating the plans to the originally agreed upon scope, only to have a jurisdiction come back and say, well, we just heard this from the public, can we make these changes? So I agree that like it does take a fair amount of time to do that initial, this is what we want, because there's a lot of things that, in as much as we say it's 4 lanes and it's this, that, the other, it's like, well, is it 11-foot lanes? Is it 12-foot lanes? Like, there's a lot of that goes on in the beginning to get to that, that key 30%, which is why, to your point, that there's so much that goes in with like with the jurisdiction and that consultant to get to that 30%, that once we get there, I think we need to stay there. So, kind of taking all that and, so to me, like, so that's kind of that biggest time suck is, it changes and again, making sure that it goes from, involvement to updates, and that all the work that the jurisdiction put in with that consultant in the beginning isn't wasted, and it's made by the right people, that it's made by the people with like the technical expertise who understand, it doesn't maybe sound like a lot to some people, like why this lane, instead of being, 11 feet, why can't it be 10 feet? So, that those decisions are made by the right people. So that's my thoughts right there. Thanks.
Beth, thank you. I really do agree with your point here with regard to after the 30%, it becomes more of a notification to the public as to status rather than seeking more input. That's a very good point. Patrick?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Beth, for your comments. That was great. One thing we've been kicking around would be potentially having a submittal before the 30%. So where we're seeing projects that we might want to do a viable alternatives analysis that are still meeting the scope and intent of the project, or there are unresolved questions, is build the time in early and maybe even start prior to the phase of construction to do that DCR phase to really line out those parameters and front load that public engagement, extend our design schedule a little bit to really put those efforts early before we're developing plan sheets, get that 15%, and then we can start transitioning more into the design phase. Obviously, with still some unresolved at 30s, but maybe an evaluation early in project development, maybe through the project charter, where we line up that submittal schedule and determine if we want that more robust DCR phase in project delivery. And I think there's some cases where that makes sense. There's some cases where we don't have a lot of right of way. We don't anticipate a lot of controversy, where we can pretty much do our standard process and go straight to 30s.
Right. That's a good point, Patrick. I think we operate in Oro Valley the exact same way. We before we start generating plan sheets, we really do want to lock down what the public wants. And I think that goes along with Beth too. And both of your points are duly noted. I think, Dan, you've got enough there to be able to incorporate, or Rick?
Basically, it's concurrence that what you're seeing and hearing matches what we were hearing, because our assessments and interviews were primarily with private sector folks on the contracting utility right away. We wanted to match that against, are we seeing that the same perspective from the jurisdictional side as well? It sounds like you are. You're echoing the same viewpoint, sentiments, concurs it. So that works for us. Thank you.
All right, thank you. You want to keep moving on?
Absolutely. So the second section deals with construction impacts, closures, acceptance of this, and recognizing that is Pandora's box. We just simply said that there needs to be collaboration on programming phasing. We've been better about accepting the impacts associated with significant closures. We've seen that up and down I-10. We've seen that with the city's 22nd Street Bridge project. So we know we're getting more aggressive and assertive with what we can tolerate for pain. I think there's even more that we can explore and be aware of and can help educate and mitigate with when it comes to multiple projects happening simultaneously. I know as I flipped through the document, there was a desire, it was not expressed as a mandate, but we ought to limit construction activities on one project simultaneously with another one, or multiple corridors, however it was said. I think we've proven we can adapt to that as long as it's not lengthy and protracted on that. Short pain, we've heard from the comments and the citizen feedback, is they'll put up with a lot more, but as long as it's for a very short duration, not extended. Anything else you want to expand on that? I know we have that one is very limited on that particular part, but that's kind of what we'd be looking to explore with that simple statement.
I think for the group, anybody want to add to this? Rick, I want to say I appreciate that and an appreciation of, multiple jurisdictions or projects that are multiple jurisdictional, and making sure that we're not choking off a region. We don't do all of the Southeast at the same time. So you end up with just a bottleneck cork. Nobody from Vail can get into the city. So yeah, I think it's pretty simple what you talked about there. Okay, next.
Next one is procurement timeframes. So what we heard was kind of a variety we just summarized. And obviously the private sectors are always going to feel that it's long, lengthy, convoluted, and they acknowledge that. But oftentimes there are extra steps involved, or some of the steps that should be straightforward wound up taking weeks, not days. So some of the things that we felt we could identify is identifying a delivery strategy prior to any procurement going on. That could simplify and streamline if you're going to use any kind of alternate delivery methods, those type of things. There was another suggestion that we felt has possibilities is bundling smaller projects. And we see some of this with the jurisdictions, and we think there's great success that can be had on this. The one key thing that the private sector came back, particularly the contracting community, is bundle according to location, not necessarily type of work. So we had that dialogue with them and kind of put that out there, and they preferred location based. So if you're doing paved shoulders in a geographic area, because the transport time, just simply getting back and forth, workers, staff, equipment, that's where their inefficiencies are at. Changed or different type of work is not as problematic, but long, lengthy transports distances, that came into play as the inefficiencies. So that's where we'd want to bundle or take advantage of intersecting roadway projects if that's a possibility. And the delivery strategy combined with C, so delivering what particular methodology is going to be utilized for the contracting aspects of it, and then setting that up from the beginning. There's a hiccup if you go in there and you're intending to do design, bid, build, and you switch gears partway through, that introduces a stop in there. So if that determination, assessment, evaluation can be done in advance and then laid out, and it goes through that from the very beginning, there were some efficiencies that felt like we could be gained because those projects that do that from the very beginning are having better success moving forward.
Okay.
Would that be happy to entertain any other comments, feedback, or discussion on that particular aspect?
Anybody? All right, well, while we keep moving here, because we're starting to run out of time.
You cut me off when you're ready and I'll move on.
Yeah.
I'll skip over it. Alternative, because number 4 kind of got into some of the same type of timeframes. Some of the suggestions we had is larger projects, maybe having a dedicated delivery team rather than just relying purely on staff when available on that. Felt like that might be a possibility. And then phasing needs and opportunities. Some of these bigger, more complicated projects, as we've seen on RTA 1, and as we set the stage for RTA 2, by thinking of how those are going to be phased out, not necessarily just breaking into 2-mile pieces, but actually using some of the strategization, that's proven to be fairly beneficial right up front. And then obviously any kind of risk assessment with opportunities as well for right-of-way utilities. How can we advance that where possible? I think the utility and right-of-way, I think folks are fairly up to speed on that. I will summarize both of those with discussions that we're having ongoing right now within our organization, as well as with some of the jurisdictions as they started doing a deep dive into this, particularly meetings we've had with some of the leads looking forward on some of their bigger projects, is recognizing that a lot of activities that can happen, and we keep hitting upon this 30% milestone, that's felt that if it's got enough aspects of it locked down, now additional activities such as right-of-way permitting, utilities, can all be brought online in parallel. There's been models that have utilized this throughout the region on some isolated or incidents or easier projects, but feel that's got an awful lot of potential to be spread across multiple programs so that we get a lot more activities in parallel. You've heard Mike talk about that in various sets, that we oftentimes have a linear progress. We want to now get into maximizing our parallel or overlapping opportunities to the greatest degree possible and recognizing the coordination that needs to happen with that. So that would be basically, we highlight utilities right of way, but that would also expand into permits and clearances as well with the regulatory agencies.
I would agree with you. I think the top 3 as far as time suck goes is on the front end, the public input in the design aspect and making sure that that's all taken care of. But a close number 2 and number 3 is going to be your utilities. They seem to gum up project progress and right-of-way acquisition as well. Those are long lead items on the front end that have to be taken care of. So whatever we can do to speed that up, and if we can incorporate that with the earlier conversations on the 30%, that'd be great.
Templates that we're starting to flush out a little bit further with that and try to look at the details that would be tangible for the organizations in the various jurisdictions to follow. So we're flushing those details as we speak.
Perfect.
Last one then is talking about staffing. And this was wide open across multiple variety, but the common themes of this from the private side and from the folks we talked to is really
We recognize there are inexperienced staff. Sometimes it's related to a particular discipline. Sometimes it's related to a particular delivery methodology. So that dominoes throughout the overall project delivery process when it comes to processing, reviewing, being able to navigate through things, and then getting approvals and sticking with it. So plus workload. That goes back to some of the comments we heard and that we've shared here, is that if it's taken us 4 weeks to get a meeting with somebody because they're not available and they're the only one within the organization that's doing that, it may work for the organization, but when you bring a big project load on, it's causing its share of ramifications and aspects on that. And then lastly, turnover. These are all things we're dealing with, but felt that there could be proactive steps. We're working forward on that. So some of the things we're contemplating is just utilization of different consultant utilization, specialized consultants for certain task activities, on calls. Some of the things we're contemplating here is what role can RTA play in those. We're starting some of those discussions with jurisdictions as we speak. Plus, we're looking at them ourselves, saying, where can we offer that up as a resource where we may have certain capabilities or avenues or other process steps that may be more advantageous for us to do. And we're having discussions with the city on the Grant Road project as we advance the right-of-way activities on that as we speak. So we list in there that there may be all those same things I'm talking about is with design, procurement, where can we offer that and how can we flesh that out in greater detail? So we're working to put some of the specifics to that to aid the discussion. So this is the high clip summary, available to go back in any detail, but this kind of paints the picture. I guess what we'd be looking for, is there anything we're missing? Or does this kind of capture the robust intent? Does it capture what you're seeing from your perspectives? And can we continue to run with this?
Yeah, I'd open this up to the floor. Anybody want to chime in on this? And then Rick, ultimately, this is going to end up as policy in the POP?
I think still to be determined on exactly what we'll do with this, but I think it's going to be a tool that we'll utilize, whether it sits in POPs or whether it's incorporated and indoctrinated as just standard best practices. We can have that discussion moving forward as we flush it out.
Okay. Beth?
So I think it's a great idea to have RTA staff in some of these areas. Something that I found, when working at the city, especially on some of the bigger projects, it was enormously helpful to have like a second project manager as kind of like a backup, so that when like the number one person was out or unavailable, that things didn't come grinding to a halt. That when, to the comment earlier about decision making needing to happen sooner, that decisions can happen. And maybe that's something that we're looking at, is that having like an RTA project manager kind of in tandem with like a jurisdictional project manager. I think it also helps when we come to things like reimbursement. I know that I heard, a lot of complaints from the jurisdiction side and from RTA side about, like, oh, well, this item, makes sense as part of this project, but did the amount make sense? Or, just because there wasn't the involvement with the project, that when it came, for reimbursement, that there was too much back and forth on whether something should have been included or not. So maybe if there is somebody on RTA staff who, like I said, is kind of functioning as that like alternate PM, that some of these other things can move quicker, like the reimbursement and some of these decisions, things along those lines. So I think that this is a great idea. Just kind of in general, I don't know that necessarily all of these items work for every jurisdiction, but I don't know that every jurisdiction needs assistance with all these items. But I kind of think as a minimum is maybe having like some of that project management assistance or backup would be enormously helpful for a number of reasons.
Sure. Okay, thank you. Catherine?
Thanks. But yeah, I think these are a lot of great ideas that were captured. I know on the county side, we do a lot of upfront planning before we kick off the project. So all the things that came to delivery methods and what your submittals will be during design and how you're going to procure it, we try to nail down before we even initiate a project, partially because it's going to be in your scope for your designer, some of those things. But I think it makes sense, but it is case by case. I know Patrick kind of mentioned that depending on the scale of the project, it can look very different what's required. feel like there should be some caution to the cost implications of some of the suggestions on here. When you have a inspector from a consultant rather than a staff inspector, and we do that, we make those decisions, that's fine. It is far more costly. Just like if you put any element of a project out to consultants,
Right.
you're really increasing the soft costs. And I know that there's sections in the admin code that are really focused on soft costs. So it's not going to go in the right direction necessarily. So I think we should be cautious on taking the biggest chance for gains. Like I think utility coordination, any assistance in getting a regional effort there, that is such a pain point on projects. And having an RTA help with that organization would be huge. And then to the staffing thing, I mean, acknowledged all of these things with workloads, turnover, inexperience, but those are outlined organizational challenges in any organization, whether it be private or public, and you usually are going through waves of lots of experience to very little, and it's a bit out of control, but I think that having awareness of this is helpful, and also having, the RTA's participation, the idea, Beth, you said of participating in some of the meetings, whereas it may not be in a decision-making standpoint, having that awareness throughout the project life could be really helpful.
That continuity.
Yeah.
Yeah, agree. What's and I think this is a question for the larger group because we did lose we did lose a jurisdiction here. Is what do we do with this? So if we could just pin this as a everybody review and possibly come back if you have anything to supplement this for next meeting. Does that sound reasonable?
Only add that you can see more details in the two memos that have been sent out, both the one authored by myself as well as Mike that went to the board. So you'd be able to see if there's additional aspects in there that cover or address that may prompt additional thoughts as well. But I think that would be fine.
Right. Okay. Perfect. Catherine.
Yeah, I agree, additional thoughts on this. Another thing I wanted to mention, this, I think Rick mentioned they were talking to consultants and contractors and whatnot. And I think that's good as we flush out all the lessons we need to learn from RTA 1. Probably a similar conversation with all the jurisdictional staff, which has happened in some committees, but maybe there'd be value in having those side conversations and compiling the pain points there as well.
Yeah, agreed. Anything more on this particular piece? And can we get to that last? What do we have timeline? Why don't we do a review of this, bring this back to the next meeting, and then Dan, can you jump in the timeline?
Vice Chair, we can pull up the timeline real quick. So while that's popping up, just thanks to everyone. This was really great discussion today. We did make it through all of our items that we had intended for today, only deferring a few comments to next week. With that, if we can scroll down just a little bit to the bold, there we go, October 1st. So our next meeting, just wanted to talk real quick. We were hoping to do a half day for that because we have quite a bit on the agenda and quite a bit of additional comments that we want to resolve as part of that comment resolution. But just to highlight the items, we did send out some information to the CART to get some feedback on. And so if our CART meeting is on the 29th?
29th, Monday, 29th.
The 29th. So hopefully we'll have some feedback from that initial meeting to share just as information, not only on the POPs, but how the CART feels their role should be moving forward so that they're effective in providing good transparency and accountability to our process moving forward. And so we wanted to share any information that we get on that, as well as any information we get back from the board tomorrow related to delivery or oversight, transparency, or anything else that's relevant to our process here. So that information, I think, would be good, helping us to dive into the rest of the comment resolution, just as information. And what that last item and the last item here have connected, the CART and TMC roles. That's all part of our admin code, the oversight and transparency section, which per Paul's recommendation will add into the POPs. We haven't sent that section out, which we will. But with that, that's kind of bring everything together. So the delivery side, the role of the CART, the TMC, oversight, transparency, accountability, all that's going to be part of that section. And so we'll certainly want to start those discussions and get some feedback on that portion. So that's kind of our agenda for the first. With that, would a little bit of extended time and maybe some additional breaks throughout be appropriate? Maybe 8 to noon on October 1st. Would that work for the committee?
Yeah, can everybody make that?
Yes.
Okay.
Sarita will have somebody there.
Okay. Dan, why don't you send out an email for everybody to react to?
Sure.
And we could all react to this by tomorrow, so that we know that we have not only a quorum, but we've got 100% jurisdictional representation. I think it's we still have a lot to go through, and these are some big meaty roles. Dan, I want to ask you, I corresponded with you last night on an issue that's on the ballot language. I don't know if that's in the purview of this group to review, or maybe not. What's your take on this, Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. So that item is an administrative required item as part of the RTA Next and plan approval. With that, it's required that we get that to the county by early November. And so we're hoping to get board adoption of the ballot language tomorrow. But if not, we could call a special meeting in October to have them review and approve any revisions to that. With that, the draft ballot language is attached as part of the board agenda tomorrow. You're welcome to all of you are welcome to take a look at that. We have gone through some very lengthy internal review and legal review of that document to make sure that it's in compliance with all the statutory requirements. So we're pretty confident in the language and the questions, particularly which come directly from statute. But happy to answer any questions on that offline. Or if it is not approved tomorrow, if there are any follow-up discussions to that, we could have those offline as well.
So that's really that's not within the purview of this body for a review then.
Correct, Mr. Vice Chair. As a reminder, our goal for this is primarily to update the POPs and admin code by October 1st, and then reconvene as needed thereafter related to those items. There's certainly an interconnectedness with all this, but that is more of an administrative requirement.
Fair enough. Okay. Anybody else have anything they needed added to this schedule? Or just like the previous document we just looked at, if you see something in here that you want to add on, certainly take a stab at that. Bring your comments back to staff. And then as far as October 8th goes, that is the week of fall break. Do we have consensus that we will take that week off?
With that, Mr. Vice Chair, I did get some feedback from the chair last week to poll the subcommittee. So in that email that I'll send out to confirm October 1st, I can also check to see if there is availability for October 8th if it's needed. If we don't quite finish all of our topics on October 1st, we could potentially use that as kind of an overflow meeting to address any of those comments, if that's appropriate.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, we have 5 minutes left. Anything else from anybody? I see
Anything else
no
from staff?
hands. Staff?
We're good in the room, Mr. Vice Chair.
Okay. Well, then I think we end 5 minutes early.
Thank you all very much. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Have a great day.
All right, thank you.